Hey everybody. Welcome to our first meetup. My name is Ryan, and I guess I clicked the button to start the meetup group, which is probably most of the work that I've done for this first event. But we had lots of different individuals sign up for the meetup, and Stanislav volunteered Aftonbladet and also originally to be one of the speakers. So we're real excited that we could finally have our first event. I think it's been 5 months since we started the group. For me, I guess I took a back seat on being one of our main speakers, but he'll give a little introduction, a little bit about Aftonbladet and Schibsted, and then we'll have our 3 speakers, which I'll let you introduce. So thanks for organizing, and everyone, thanks for being here.
Great. All right, so you may have already seen the event schedule, which is posted on the blog, but it's basically going to be one presentation, and then we're going to go out and have a nice little pizza buffet with food and drink, and then we're going to have 2 short presentations after that. So, but I also want to take the opportunity to speak a little bit about Schibsted, which is a brand you maybe do not recognize, but what you may recognize are some of the brands that it operates, such as Aftonbladet, Svenska Dagbladet, Blocket, and Prisjakt. But that's not all. We actually have even more companies owned by Schibsted, which operate mostly in Norway and Sweden, but also in a large part of Europe. And another thing, we love WordPress. We may not use it. We may not use it for the sites that we just showed, but we do have a lot of really cool WordPress projects. For example, we have a very large blog network of over 400 different blogs. For example, we have Härligt Hemma, which is like an interior design inspiration site. I see it's a little cut off, so you can't actually see everything, but we have viral sites, which like at and Aftonbladet Viralt, which you may have accidentally clicked on when you see it in the Facebook feed. We have long-read journalism sites, which are also in WordPress, advertorials, and opinion sites where anyone can submit an article for everyone to read. All of this in WordPress. And we are actually today welcoming another member, the UWay, which is a fashion inspiration site, which is actually just launched today on a brand new WordPress platform. So, of course, I want to plug a little bit. So if this sounds interesting, if you'd like to work on some of the largest WordPress sites in Sweden, grab me after when we're having something to eat. We can talk more. Now I will leave it over to Erik, our first speaker.
Thank you. The mandatory text switch. I love it when technology actually works. One click and the presentation is live. So it's great to be here. It's great to see so many here. I fully second the fact that why don't we have more WordPress meetup groups? I mean, we had a WordCamp main conference here in Stockholm 2011. The next WordCamp was 2014 in Norrköping. I'm hearing rumors that it might be time for another one fairly soon. But between those, we really have nothing, which is a shame because we're talking about the world's biggest publishing system. It's great that we finally do have one. So I also want to welcome you warmly here today. So who am I and why am I standing here? Usually a very good question. My name is Erik Bernskild. I'm a lot of things at the same time. I try to be. I work mainly in web strategy, meaning I try and find out and tell clients what they should do, why they should do it, and not just push out a website online mindlessly, forgetting half of the things that they ought to do, broadly speaking. And then I'm also a part-time business advisor. I'm an advisor at the Goethe University in Frankfurt, which coaches companies that start up down there, and I'm their web advisor for all things web. And of course, I run 2 companies. One's a consulting strategy agency, which is actually turning 5 today, which makes me really proud, where we basically do the strategy bit, take care of all the development from concept to the final thing. And then I firmly believe that this shouldn't actually be only for the big companies that have a big budget and can afford everything. I believe that we can actually, as a community, get all the things we think about and do down to even smaller companies that actually don't have the biggest budget necessarily. I mean, a small business anywhere, they should also be able to have a nice website. And with WordPress, we can do a lot with a small budget as well, which is why I have a WordPress agency where we try to incorporate the same ideas. So enough about me, really, and into the topic at hand. I do want to keep this fairly short, maybe 30 minutes, and then say 15 minutes for discussion. So please do keep in mind what are your challenges, what are your experiences with the topic in WordPress, and because that's where the good thing happens. We can talk about the challenges and hopefully solve the challenges, even though that might be a tall order with internationalization in WordPress. So I thought I'd start off with where we are today. What can we do with localization in WordPress? And I wish I could stand here and be like, yay, internationalization is so easy, it's easy to do, we can just click a button and it's done. Sadly, not the case. How many of you have created multilingual websites in WordPress? How many of you found this to be the easiest thing you've ever done? I love it when audiences give me the answer that I expect instead of everyone raising their hands. That would have made my talk a little bit trickier. So you know it's not easy and you know it's not very straightforward. Luckily, WordPress as a WordPress foundation are realizing this, because this is a stat from State of the Word, the WordPress conference and the survey this year, and they found that actually WordPress is downloaded today more in a non-English language than it is in English, which means they're realizing, hey, we need to do something about WordPress being English only, pretty much, what has been. But that begs the question, why multilingual websites in the first place? The answer in a country such as Sweden is obviously really straightforward. We are very few people who speak a minority language, and if we want to communicate with the outside world, we pretty much have to speak English. Hey, the entire evening today is in English. That should probably say something. So the first reason is obviously globalization. We can't go anywhere today without actually being forced on another culture, another language. And in economics and in business theory, we were talking about something called time and distance decay, which basically means the world's getting smaller. Fancy term for a very easy concept that I'm sure you all understand. We can hop on a flight, be in New York in 7-8 hours. That's really impressive. Same with China, which also means we get the cultures mixed up everywhere we are. And it also means we have to get behind a language concept. So a guess, how many languages do you think we have in the world? Would you say 2,000 or above? Maybe above 4,000? 5,000? Anyone would guess that we have more than 5,000 languages in the world?
Yeah.
We have over 6,500 languages. This figure is from last year, so I'm not sure if it's changed. Now, granted, most of these, probably 80-90% of these 6,500 are spoken by 2, 3, 5, 10 people. But it still leaves us a couple of thousand which are actively spoken by a large number of people. And we have over 196 countries. Well, we actually have 196 countries in the world. This is why it's important. And as soon as we want to start reaching out to something other than our very own country, we need multilingual websites. In fact, even reaching out today to our very own country, we need a multilingual website. Because we can't be sure that everyone who's visiting a Swedish website today understands Swedish, or force that. While it's a nice idea and a nice concept, that's not necessarily the case. And as we'll see, looking at other countries, they may be multilingual from the start. So before even getting behind and trying to set off building a multilingual website, you actually need to have some appreciation of languages themselves. You don't have to be a language nerd. It's funny because when I'm at high schools and I now and then talk to students, I usually have to finish by saying, oh, learn many languages. It's really important for your career. And I remember sitting there myself, everyone saying, you need to study languages. But it's true. And I don't have to say that to a room full of developers, or mostly developers, say that, hey, languages are cool. But you can't do multilingual sites properly, know languages properly. Because what happens is, you don't grasp the full width of languages that are available. For example, we have right-to-left languages, which you need to support online. But most interestingly, which English developers fully forget, is that the word order in other languages than English is different. I used to remember a few examples where you would have, for example, if you had a number that in Swedish or English would be fairly towards the end, in another language they could start with it. It could be completely different. A verb can be somewhere completely in another place than it is in English. And what does developers do? Well, developers usually, if they're really good today, and we've seen a big development over the years, if they're really good, they're going to allow a full string to be translatable in any order. But what many do when they develop themes and plugins is they do this halfway. So they start out with half the string and then decide, I need a code block in here, so I'm going to start with the first part of the sentence, then I'm going to do some code, and then I'm going to finish the sentence. Well, what happens when someone needs to translate this to a language that actually does not have that word order? Basically, it can't be done. So this is something you actually need to understand. And if you appreciate the language and understand the differences that the different languages in the world have, then we have an ability to actually do this properly. Be it for Chinese, which I'm not even going to begin talking about because it's really different, or even some Eastern European languages, which have this completely different order. I mean, even German would be a language which easily has a different word order than Swedish in many cases. So I have 2.5 methods for translation that I really want to talk about today. And you're going to understand why it's 2.5 on this slide. So one's called pure translation. I'm going to go into what these are. The other's called regional adaptation. And the final, which is, we can see it much more clearer than I expected to, is Google Translate. And before you laugh, I'm going to make a pretty compelling case that Google Translate is actually a really, really useful tool for making a site multilingual under certain very specific circumstances. Now, I do want to mention that the technical aspect of this is easy to some extent. I would bet within 10 minutes you could all here have a multilingual WordPress site up and running from a technical standpoint. You go grab a plugin, you configure it. It's easy, we can all do that. What's not easy is getting this to work in a large sense and getting this set up so the way that a user can actually use this and an organization can work with this website and that it can fulfill its goals, which is what I'm going to be focusing. So the first method, which I'd like to call pure translation, and the pure is there for emphasis. Translation is actually a very narrow thing, and it's far more narrow than we typically think. So this is the simple approach. I'm dubbing it just add language. Basically, we have a site in Swedish, and we're going to be replicating it in English, or German, or Chinese, or whichever language we want to. We're replicating it. That is, in a WordPress term, we're going to be using a translation plugin. But we're keeping the very same site structure, and we're keeping the very same content. I'm going to come back to why this is so crucial. Because think about what translation actually means. It means not word for word, but content translation exactly as it is. How many of you have ever been on a website? Let's take the case, you're in a country where you don't know the first language. So you're in Germany and you don't know German. And you go to a German website and you click English. What do you want? Well, you expect the very same content that you saw in German to be in English. what do most people do when they create a website? They tend to be smart and say, well, English, that's the language that many speak who just do not, not speak German, therefore they should have some other content. Or it should be a dumbed down version of the content. That's a really bad way to approach it. Because what you're doing is saying, well, if you can't read it in German in this example, you don't deserve to be treated with the content that you were looking for. Basically, it's worthless to a user. In terms of plugin, there are two. I would argue there are two. WPML, which is really powerful, awesome, and I also passionately hate it at the same time. And there's Polylang, which is really nice. It's starting to grow, but isn't as full-fledged feature complete as WPML. I would argue today that for a simple site, you might be able to get away with Polylang. It is not as resource intensive on the server, and it is a bit nicer code behind it. WPML, on the other hand, can be used to power some really, really powerful sites. It is really good. It has a really good admin interface. The code is horrible. It is very resource intensive, but it does work, and it's a premium plugin. Polylang's free. We use WPML for a client powering 13 languages with 13 different editors. And it works. It requires a server, but it does work, and editors are happy to use it. But then, what if we actually want different content for a different language? Well, I started out by arguing that you never ever actually do want different content for a different language. But this is sort of where regional adaptation kicks in. This is saying, I want content that is different for different countries. For example, here in Sweden, let's take e-commerce. E-commerce is a brilliant example of this, where you actually have different products that might sell in different countries. It's not language specific, it's country specific. And this is important. And this is sort of where regional adaptation kicks in. You're adapting to a specific region, in this case, it is a country. In a WordPress context, this would most definitely mean a multi-site installation. Because if you ever try and manage separate content structures with WPML within the same setup, same install of WordPress, give it a few weeks or months and you're not going to be looking at that site and be able to manage it in a really productive way. I guarantee you. Because WordPress is not meant to be used that way. WPML is not meant to be used that way. Multi-site, on the other hand, is. It's the same common installation. You update it once, you manage it once, it rolls out across any number of sites, but you could easily make different country variations depending on that. I'm going to come to a challenge here, because regional adaptation is where we have the biggest challenge. Because frankly, just translating content and pushing it online is no challenge. You need to have some really beautiful content written. You need to send it off to an agency that does it well, or do it in-house if you speak multiple languages. And then you just need to plug it into pages on your WordPress site. That is actually straightforward. Though I wish it was a core feature in WordPress, or at least a standardized feature, it is still pretty easy for a decent volume in terms of a site. Doing this is where it gets tricky. Because this is where WordPress clearly does not have any way of support. Because what you're looking at is each site has potentially a complete different structure with different content, but it's still the same site. You should still be able to navigate between the sites in a multi-site installation. And potentially, you need to be able to translate the different sites. So this is where we can get to two levels. And let me come back to that. First, I want to be a little academic. And I have two very academic slides. This is one of them. Before we can start talking about regional adaptation or any sort of adaptation to different countries, we need to understand culture. And if we're going to be talking about culture, we need to be talking about culture in this very same way and have the very same definition. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about different things. So I have this definition guy named Ralph Linton in 1945 wrote that a culture is the configuration of learned behavior and results of behavior whose component elements are shared and transmitted by the members of a particular society. It's really long and beautiful. Maybe I lost you halfway. That's not the point. The point is, what he's saying is we're sort of a group, and what we feel and grow up with having or feelings together, that is a culture, and that can manifest itself in many different ways. You can read the full body of literature, which is amazing. They usually talk about culture components, where language is probably the easiest and most accessible. Just think about it. If someone comes here to Sweden and tries to speak Swedish with you, you're going to be pretty happy that they're actually trying to do that. And that's sort of built in, because someone's appreciating Swedishness, our culture. So with that being said, we need to be able to adapt and realize that if we're creating a German website, we are appealing to Germans. So we need to leave everything that we as Swedes do at the door and learn about how Germans function, or how US people function, or how British people function, if we're ever to make a website that appeals to them. And then we get to the tricky part, which is locales. If you've set up WordPress in any language but English, you'll know that all the language files have a two-part sort of language code to them. You have SV_SE, which is basically Sweden Swedish, because we have Sweden Finnish. You don't ever see a language pack created for Sweden Finnish, but it officially exists, which is why we have it. This is easy in other countries around the world, and we tend to forget this. Here in Sweden, we speak Swedish, mostly, and then potentially English as an added extra language. But what if we have a country such as Canada? In Canada, they speak English and French. They don't speak English and then some also speak French. They really speak English and French. Go to Quebec in Canada. The road signs are going to be in French. People are going to try and speak to you in French. And they actually have tried to avoid English at all costs. Drive-through is not called drive-through in Quebec. It's called a French version of drive-through. That's how much they really want to avoid English. But this poses a problem because we can't expect someone who clicks French in a global perspective to be from France. That's actually pretty idiotic in a grander sense. And Canada is one of these great examples where we need to have Canada-specific content, and that needs to exist in English and in French. Because otherwise we'd be leaving out the French-speaking population or leaving out the English-speaking population. And we can actually do no inference and no way say, well, the French-speaking people need this type of content. We can't. It should just be a complete, utter translation. Leaving then you to choose Canada to be the primary designator of what content you're going to get. Another country here in Europe is Switzerland, which is perhaps even more interesting because they speak even more languages. They would speak German, they would speak Italian, and they would speak French in about equal proportions, I think. And you would also have the very old language that no one actually speaks, but it's official. It's Rätoromanisch, which is old. No one speaks it, but it exists. So most people in Switzerland speak 3 languages. We in Sweden are about 2.2, 2.3. But there you also have the same problem. Content for Switzerland needs to exist in German, it needs to exist in Italian, and it needs to exist in French. Otherwise, you're leaving out half or a third of the population, even though they know some of the other language. That's just, the fact. So that is why locales are inherently really important as you get to greater scale. And if you've been to an airline website, or let's take IKEA as an example. It's always nice to take IKEA as an example as a Swede, because we'll have our IKEA, right? If you go to IKEA's website, you're going to be asked, in many airlines, you're going to be asked, what country are you in? Because that that's the designator for what product you're going to get. And then you're going to be asked, all right, what language do you speak? And these are two different things. And obviously we can say, oh, I speak German, therefore I'm in Germany. I speak French, Therefore, I'm either in Canada, I'm in Africa, I could be in South America, I could also be in the Netherlands, I could be in Switzerland, right? Where am I? It's a big difference between Africa and France, or the Netherlands, for sure. So that's important to think about before embarking on creating a website and trying to do translation and then failing at it, because what you're actually doing is not translation. Translation is what WPML does really nice, Polylang 2, but it is not solving some of the issues that you may have or some of the goals you may have. So again, the technical aspect is really easy. The viable long-term solution is hard. Because you also have the added problem of maintaining a site that has several languages, even if you just do translation. When you have a site that runs on 13 different languages, every time you want to push out a new feature to that site, you will need to translate 13 languages worth of strings. Even if you just change one string, you need to have that sent off and translated into 13 languages, which can be a pain, and you need to adjust for that in your processes. And of course, you also can't make a mess of WordPress, because then no one's going to be able to use it back-end, ever, which is a challenge today in WordPress. So a few words on user experience, or finish off on. The first is user focus. And the most important thing, I would argue, the only thing that we do as designers or developers or web professionals in any sense is we focus on the user and we try to make something beautiful for the user to use. This could mean, and this is important, the user is definitely not just the front-end user clicking on the website. The user is most definitely also an editor in the organization trying to update the site. Too many sites are created in a way that nobody can ever update, and therefore they're not getting updated. And if they're not getting updated, they're also not good for the end user on the website. But a user focus here also means we need to really think about the user and the end user, what he or she wants from the website that we're trying to make multilingual. Do they want a translation? Do they want content that's adapted to where they specifically are? And not leaving someone out. And when we start thinking about this, this is when we can actually create a useful solution that users love. And the first thing is that translations needs to be good. And I say this sort of an aside because too many translations are done very poorly. Because here's where many agencies think we can save some money here. Right? I know German decently, all right? So I happen to speak fluent German. Yet I would not, and this might be a special case for German, but I would never let my translated German go out on a public website. Because German is a language where you make frequent grammar errors, I can assure you. Which in case just one grammar error on a website is going to bring down the whole impression for the company right away. Imagine you going to, say, an American corporation's website, which happens to be translated into Swedish. The likelihood of this occurring is probably 0, but let's just imagine this is the case. And then you find the content is not really very well translated into Swedish. Would you say to yourself, oh, well, they've attempted to do it in Swedish, so I'm going to be fine with it for now? Or are you going to think to yourself, oh, they can't get it right in my language. I don't like you. That's probably the closer of the two, what you're going to be thinking. Which is why it's important to make translations great. And you also need to not just translate them, but you need to validate them. Because if you send something that is sort of technical to a translator who actually doesn't know has an in-depth knowledge of what they're translating, it may come back being technically correct, but it may also come back being terms that no one's ever using. And you also need someone who knows the language to proofread what you're getting back. I had an agency come back with a translation in Dutch, and a couple of the strings were in Polish. That's magnificent. And had that gone out in the live app, that wouldn't be so nice, because the first person who would have caught it would be a user who would never say anything. And probably the 100th or 1,000th user would know and realize and say, oh, that's in Polish, and they would let the company know. But most people would just sort of silently fail, which would be really bad. There are luckily a few tools that are available to us to make this easy. WordPress has its own BlockPress system, which is where much of WordPress translation is done. It's not the most beautiful system in the world, sort of legacy WordPress looks, but it's open source. You can install it on your site. It's free to use in this sense, and it does function really well. As I said, we have a project with 13 languages where none of the users are in any way technical, and we've invited them to BlockPress, and they manage without actually having to ask any questions about how to translate. So I think that does work pretty well. If the client has a little bigger budget, then Transifex or poeditor.com, they're really beautiful online tools for managing translations. You can easily send better updates, get reports on how the translation is progressing. All of these things that are really nice in a project of multilingual scale. But I would definitely use them to keep track of how the translations are doing, how it's progressing. Because as soon as you change a string, it needs to go off to translation. And if you can have the translator be notified at regular intervals that they need to do something, you can create automation and you can get that into your development and deployment practices. And it is all about setting expectations. Because that's what we're doing. When we're saying we have a multilingual website, we're also saying this is a site that is as good as if it was created by a company or an agency that speaks the local language, that understands the local culture, that exists where it's trying to be. If you're a Swedish company in Germany, well, you're going to get major bonus points because you're Swedish, because many in Germany actually love Sweden, but you're not going to get any bonus points for screwing up the German when you're trying to sell someone something. And that's going to be the same for a company coming from Sweden to the US to China. Not to put a finer point, in China is going to be really complex. So you need to understand it, and you actually need to meet the expectations, which are set at native high level. So you're competing with native speakers. Don't kid yourself thinking that you have it easier because you're translating. You do not. And then, this is a very specific thing, but it deserves to be mentioned. Because so many people fail to create useful language switchers. Maybe you just have a flag, and the more languages you add, you sort of have to rely on the fact that people know the flags of the world. Or you just have things in a native language. Well, imagine if you switch to a language and you can't get back. So think about how the user is going to do it. Maybe having 20 flags is not a very user-friendly solution. Maybe having a drop-down in that sense is nicer. And especially when you're switching to the regional adoption method, which basically means you have to choose a country and then a language, that really puts some stress on how you design your language switchers, and you need to make sure they're really, really user-friendly. And then I did say I have a method 0.5. I don't think it's worth much more than half a method point, because it is cheating, and it's Google Translate. Don't we all love Google Translate?
Yes,
How many use Google Translate daily?
Every day.
Almost daily, at least. A couple of times a week. Well, so, Google Translate has become so much better over the years. The translation English to Swedish, I would argue, in many cases is really, really good. Some things it does really, really badly. But if you know the language, if you have an understanding of two languages, you're going to get some pretty decent results using Google Translate. And some strings in a project you could actually, if you knew the language you're translating into, by a decent margin, get through by Google Translate. But I would argue you could actually power a full website's multilingual strategy on just Google Translate. But it comes at setting expectations. Because if you define it as, hey, look at my multilingual website that exists in all of these languages, and when you click on it, it secretly uses Google Translate, what have you done? Well, you've set the expectation, this is a perfect translation, this is a perfectly adapted site, and what is the user getting? Arguably not the world's greatest translation. It can be pretty funny sometimes. And especially translating, say, Swedish into Danish, I've noticed it doesn't do a very good job. To English, for most languages, yes. between other languages, not as good. Let's face it, Swedish is not that big of a language, nor is Danish or Norwegian. There it has some problems. But if you clearly mark, translate using Google Translate, big fat button at the top, or call out, then what are you doing? Well, you're saying, I'm offering you an easy way to view this website in any language that you like. But I want you to know it's not excellent. It's just Google Translate. But I'm offering this to you in a very easy and accessible way. Is this better than not doing it at all? We could discuss that. I would arguably say for some, yes, it would be. For some, the accessibility aspect of actually being able to present the language and present the site in multiple languages trumps the fact that it's not as great of a translation. Because you would simply be excluding too many people if it weren't. And if it's not feasible for the company in a budget perspective, because at the end of the day, that's what we always have to weigh our solutions against, then maybe it is a decent solution. I would argue at least worth half a method. Let's not put it on a big site. Let's try and make room for a budget for this. But if it is a site that needs to be accessible, why not? What are we going to lose by including this rather than nothing as an option? Because most people are technically savvy enough to go to Google Translate, be able to find the place where they enter a URL and translate the site. We're just making it easier for them. So with that, I'm going to spin my 2 slides around. So I'm going to do this one first. I'm on the internet. Would you be surprised? I'm also fairly easy to find because I happen to be the only one in the world with my very tough to spell name. So if you get it right, you can easily find me. If there's anything, we're here all the night, but please do connect, send an email, questions, anything. That's it. With that, the most fun part is questions. If you have any questions specifically, go ahead. If you want to share some challenge or some experiences that you would input on or that you think were really great, that's even better, I would argue. So, thank you. And now I challenge someone to have an experience they want to share or a question. Otherwise, this part's going to fall flat.
Would you make the SEO-friendly URLs multilingual as well, not SEO in different languages?
I would argue yes, for sure. There might be cases when that's not feasible. For example, I would say an edit page, for example, tied into a platform. You would be adding a profile, a register profile, or updating a profile. There might not be a harm that that's called update in all languages. Ideally, I think they should be translated. Any other opinions on translating that? How many of you think, yes, translate slugs? How many of you think, no, don't translate slugs? Right, so the majority thinks yes, because I'm excluding all of you who didn't want to answer.
Well, what you mentioned before that Google Translate doesn't really perform well between Swedish and Danish, for example.
This is my personal experience.
And I agree perfectly, because as far as I understand, they always have English as the origin. So they go from Swedish to English, and then they do a translation from English to Danish, which means that we'll actually get a tier translation, and that will always suck. Because you don't follow the context.
Yeah.
You need to have the context adaptation from one language to the other, and then the context adaptation one more time.
Absolutely.
And that will fail.
Yes. I actually saw an article that I had to translate from Danish into Swedish. I know, shame on me. But where they actually managed to translate the currency sort of to dollars. So, but leave the number intact. So it was a completely different.
So my recommendation would be actually to, if you're going to have a multi-site that is going to be translated from with Google Translate as the main idea, then you're going to actually start with English as your target. Because then you will get a better context to the other languages, and you will get a fairly good result, even if you're not splendid in English.
True. Very good point. Very good point. because at least that's almost always feasible. 2 languages, Swedish English, would probably always be feasible. So I think that's an excellent solution.
Would you recommend automatically switching to the local language, or should it always be a user selection?
I'm on the fence about that. I'm always on the fence about recognizing based on something that's never right. I used to be against it, thinking, well, because I travel a lot, so I would usually get recognized into speaking a language that I don't speak, or being somewhere where I'm really not. But then again, I think the key point is, how large of a percentage do you actually get right? If it's high enough, you might well decide that, well, screw the grumpy people like me who usually get it wrong, to the benefit of 80% where you usually get it right. But I would say that sort of decision, I would try it because it's an idea that feels good to the user. But I would also try and follow it up with, if it's useful to the users that actually land on the page that you're sending them to. Because if it's not, we're doing them a disservice. And I think that could be on a case-by-case basis. So I'm on the fence, to be honest. Anyone else? Do you like being directed to a local language or not?
Depends on the context.
Yeah.
The user experience, actually.
Yeah, I mean, airlines, if we use that as an example,
They suck.
they typically, some get it. Some do it decently, others do it horribly. Having multiple domains is probably an easy way. So if you type in .se, you would get to Swedish or Sweden English or Sweden Swedish. That would be fairly easily done, because you probably just type company name .your domain if you have the ability to purchase them all. Yeah.
So I had one time this multilingual site, and it was very bad. Is it it's not better to have 2 different domains than try to make everything in the same?
Repeat the
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
please.
So the question is it better to have 2 separate sites than to have sort of one multilingual translated site? That's on a case-by-case basis for me. I think done well in separating between translation and actually changing structure and content, using something as WPML or Polylang works fine. And it just creates an added nuisance having to maintain a separate site, even if it is under multi-site. Because chances are there are so many elements that are shared between the pages that you get added when you update one page. You get the changes added to both pages. And it would require a lot more to do that in a multi-site configuration. But then sometimes you actually do want that disconnect because it just gets messy, in which case a multi-site would make sense and make a lot of sense. But I think that too is a very case-by-case basis, and it's hard to say a general rule. Which is sort of to the point why I'm trying not to focus on the full technical solutions, because it's going to depend. You're going to build something for Schibsted or Aftonbladet that's going to be, on a completely different scale with editors that needs to come in, and it needs to work fine, and it needs to be technically viable. And then the medium-sized business is going to have another primary focus and objective. And that needs us to just evaluate, what are we trying to do? What are the pitfalls of these methods? And then trying to find the best one of them.
You mentioned a few plugins, and I was thinking if you or maybe anyone else in the room has tried Babel by Code for the People, and if you have any opinion on that.
But I am looking forward to trying it now. You guys have not heard about it. But you remind me to mention a plugin that I forgot, which I don't ever want anyone to even think about using. If you want to be called a professional, Q Translate. I'm hearing it. Just don't. don't, because it ruins your website. It just adds in custom comments into your. It's just a horrible way of doing it. Never, ever, ever, ever use Qtranslate, or we might just strip you off the WordPress professional title. If you've used it, no worries. But if you use it after now and today, shame on you, says everyone in this room.
Here, here.
Thanks for reminding me. All right, I see if we're keeping to the time schedule.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, great.
You mentioned WordPress.
Yes.
I keep hearing about it. I haven't used it myself, so I guess one question is a bit more about what it is and how it can be used, and then also language packs. It's also something that I keep hearing about, and like centralizing, updating translations for plugins and stuff like that. Like, how does that tie in together, and what is WordPress? Do you know more about that, or anyone else, I guess?
Yeah, so WordPress is basically, if you're building a theme or building a custom plugin for a customer that is going to be translated, you're going to be having tons and tons of strings that need to be translated. WordPress is a graphical interface that just makes people able to go online, and you can assign them to a language, and they can easily type in the translations. There's code reference if they need to. This beats having to use POEdit on the Mac, for example. It's just a nicer way of doing it, less technical. And it allows you to go back and validate. You can see stats. You can see so many percent is translated and untranslated, and you can follow up in a better way. The tricky part is, and what I would love it to do, is have some way of syncing that back into the site as an auto update, or a repository sync with Git, for example. Doesn't exist today, and that would be the same. I think WordPress core is starting to go towards a sort of full centralized translation repository, because there is today an option of getting and downloading just language packs, which I think is great, because it's far too much of a problem today to go and translate different plugins. You may have to ask a developer, and then they have to add it into their plugin, and then it should be maintained. It's tricky, and everyone uses a different system. It would be nice if they bring this together, which I think they're doing. As I said, they are recognizing that this is important. I could easily show you a WordPress setup, but I don't want to do it on the live stream out of respect to the client. But I could show you afterwards, no problem.
But it's pretty much like POEdit or the
yeah, but in a I hate to use the word nice graphical interface, but it is a graphical interface, which doesn't completely suck, but it's not beautiful. Let's put it that way. All right, so that keeps us on the time schedule. I think it is time for that break with some food,
Exactly.
which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
So thank you for my part of this, and well, happy evening. It's going to be a long one.
great first session, I think.
Yes.
And we're ready for 2 more sessions now. And we're going to start with Jortur. He's going to talk about using WordPress as a CMS.
Yeah.
Welcome up.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm gonna be talking about using WordPress as a CMS. But before I dive into that, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself and about what we do as a company. Okay, let's turn this on. Yeah, so my name is Hjörtur. I'm Icelandic, and so it's an Icelandic name, and they don't really make it simple in Iceland. So I work at 14 Islands. It's a web development studio in Södermalm, and we are 3 partners in the company, and we focus mostly on building like really good user experiences. And we've done a few WordPress projects. These are a few of them. And what we usually do is we build out these like custom themes for clients. So we go to WordPress.org, we download WordPress, and we customly craft the themes. So that's the kind of work we do. And it's usually like it's like web pages. It's not blogs. It's more like pages with homepage and a generic page and stuff like that. So if you're on Twitter, you can find us at 14 Islands, and we actually have at 14 Islands also on Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. So feel free to reach out to us there. So as you might know, is that WordPress started out as a blogging platform, and some people today it's only a blogging platform. But in the latest versions, they've been adding more and more features to make it into like a more like CMS-like system. So that kind of begs the question: like, is it a good CMS? Is it ready to be like called like a full-blown CMS system? And I would like to argue that the answer is yes.
Oh.
Yeah. One guy in the audience agrees. So let's take just one step back and think about like what's required for a CMS system, like from a technical standpoint. So in our opinion, like you need custom templates to be able to create those designs that you have. Models, which are actually called post types in WordPress. And post types is not really a great word actually, because it kind of feels like it's only related to posts, but actually there are more post types than posts. For example, a page is a post type. So, but like in every CMS, you need a way to describe the concepts that the client asks for. And then you want custom data. You want to be able to have like dynamic content types on the site, such as like text and images and relationship. So and make this information editable within WordPress. And for this, we use custom fields. And then we think it's really important to have a good workflow, like, and WordPress has like a good editorial workflow. But what I'm more talking about here is like the development workflow. It's important to be efficient. It's important for CMS to be efficient. So let's start with custom templates. So here's an example from one of the projects we did. So this is like the design that we had to work with in the project. And as you can see, like it's impossible to just like find a theme on ThemeForest or to use some generic template to create this kind of design. You have to like customly create all the HTML, all the CSS, and all the JavaScript. And it all starts with something like this. This is like the bare minimum page template you would need in WordPress. So at the top you would define like the name of the template that shows up in the admin user interface. And then you have sub-templates, such as the header and the footer. And in the middle you have the famous the WordPress loop, which like for me when I was starting WordPress, I thought this was a little bit strange. Like you have this loop everywhere, but still you're maybe like you only have maybe a singular item, but you still have a loop. But this is just how WordPress does it. And there in between you would have the content for the page. So we try to organize our page templates into like a folder, like a page template folder. And WordPress will kind of pick this up, and it's easy to like when you create a new page to pick which template you want to use. And then it's important, like this kind of shows the WordPress roots as a blogging platform, because by default the front page of the site is your latest post, but when using it as a CMS, you pick the front page. You want that to be the home page, and then you specify the post page as the blog page or news page, or what you have as the main like feed page on the site. So now we have like designed this custom template, and now we want a way to kind of describe the concept that the client has asked you to kind of have on the site. So WordPress has this default post types, which are posts, pages, attachment, revision, and navigation menus. So these kind of you get for free, but you can also define your own post types. And here is an example from a project we worked on called Stockholm 6000. So in this project, we have the concept of a project. So a project is a place in some area in the big Stockholm area. So these are the projects, this one here. And then Stockholm is the project area. So you have like these two models or post types, which you kind of connect together. So one project belongs to a project area. So yeah, so this is kind of the way it's structured. And to create post types, you use this method in WordPress called register post types. So in this case, I'm registering the project post types. So it takes the name of the post type and then an array of options. And in that array, you can define the labels that you use in the admin interface. And it's actually you can define a lot of labels, like what you have for the add new item buttons and stuff like that. You can go really deep in defining how the WordPress UI shows these values. Then we set it to public to true because we want it to be publicly available on the site. And this is how it shows up in the WordPress admin. And clients think this is really nice because they are familiar with this concept, and it's great that WordPress kind of shows it in the main navigation menu because it makes it really easy to edit those and to add in the data that they want to add in. So it's presented in a really structural manner. So now we have the models, and now we want to attach some content to these models or data. Here is an example from a website we did for Tictail, and it has this really long home page with it's a lot of stuff. So it's a lot of content on the site, as you see, and all this content is editable in WordPress, all these images and image galleries and text and titles and buttons. They have the freedom to basically edit all this content. But what WordPress gives us by default is only this. It's a title and it's the WYSIWYG editor, the free form editor. So we want something more. So it's possible to add these extra fields, custom fields, to your pages and posts or post types. And this can be done in the WordPress admin UI, and it's essentially like a key value store. Like you can define a key and a value, and it only supports like strings, which it's very limiting. We want, like, in some cases, like WYSIWYG editor, images, galleries, and relationship, and other custom fields. So to make it easy for the clients to upload the content they want to use on the site. So this is the WordPress way to define your own custom fields. So you basically, like, you write this PHP code, and this is an example for like a price field. And like you write in the HTML inside the PHP, and you have to also write the logic to make this work in the way you want. And for us, like, it's first of all, I mean, it's a lot of work to do this for the different post types, but it's also, yeah, and you kind of to test it and make it work the way you do. So we went and did some research, and we found this library here, Advanced Custom Fields. It turns out it's really popular. It's used by a lot of companies and developers. And it's really great. Like, it gives you this user interface within WordPress where you can define your own fields, and you can like prioritize how the fields show up in the admin user interface, and it has so much, like it has so many different kind of field types, like repeater, image, gallery, flexible content. We have actually never had a case where we run out of options to use. Like, it's very extensive, I would say. All these different options. And it also provides a pretty nice API. On the page, like, you would define, like, this is kind of the main method, the field, and then you give just the name of the field, and then it will give you the value for that field. Of course, it's a bit more complicated for the image galleries and those kind of fields, but this is like the core method to use, and the documentation is also pretty good, so it's quite easy to get started and dig into. But there are few caveats to using advanced custom fields, because it's stored in a database, which makes it like it adds a little bit of overhead. Like, if the page is not cached, as an example, then it's gonna make the page a bit slower, because it has to look up the fields in the database first before showing it on the site. And also, it's not part of the repository if you're working in a Git repository or something like that, because you're like the post types and everything else is stored in the repository, so it's kind of nice to have all the code in that place. But Advanced Custom Fields has this nice feature to export the fields as a PHP code. So it is possible to, like, for example, just I forgot to say that one thing to think about here is you're not supposed to use the user interface and to use like either or. Otherwise it won't work, or you might get like the same field twice. So one possibility is to define like a global variable in the VP config, which tells if you're in development or not. So in development, you could use just the interface, but when you push to production, you would use the exported PHP code to work around the problem with having it stored in a database. So you could like paste it into this advanced custom field PHP file and basically include it like this when not in development mode. Okay, so we kind of have all the tools that we need to really like customly create our websites. But I want to share with you a little bit about how we kind of how our development workflow is. Starting with the CSS, WordPress has these two different CSS files. One is the editor CSS file, the other is a style CSS file. And the editor CSS file is what you show in the admin user interface for the Visible editor, and it kind of what you want there is the typography. You want to kind of reuse the typography between those two files. But the style CSS files, you want kind of to include everything in that file. So what we do is we use Sass. How many of you are familiar with Sass? Yeah, quite a lot. So yeah, I mean Sass is awesome. It's a preprocessor for CSS. It has a lot of cool features such as like mixins. You can do calculations within your CSS files. And you can have variables and a lot of stuff like that, so like super useful. But you can also use it to import different files. And so we use it for the editor CSS file, for the CSS file, we just include the things we need. So we can reuse it between the editor CSS and the style CSS. And this will compile like into one file. So, and this is the style CSS file. There we include everything we need, like the typography, layout, buttons, and everything. So this makes it possible for us to reuse the same code in two different places. And then we use Grunt. Who knows Grunt? How many of you know Grunt? Yeah, okay, wow. It's a really advanced audience here. So, yeah. So, Grunt is, it automates manual tasks for you. So, instead of like spending your time on like manually doing things, it kind of can automate a lot of things. And kind of the point I'm also trying to make here is that it's possible when you work with WordPress to basically use the tools that you want. Like these are the tools like Sass and Grunt and Power as an example. These are tools that we use on most of the front-end projects that we work on. So by using a Grunt watcher, you can like automatically compile the CSS on the fly. So like every time you save the Sass, it will automatically compile to CSS. And you can also use it for tasks such as to deploy the site, which is also super nice. Like if you're like working in an agile manner and you're updating and you want to push changes frequently, then this can speed up the process a lot. So another problem we've had when working with WordPress as a team, like a team of many developers and maybe working with a client, and we want to frequently show the client the updates we are making to the site, is how to share a database. Because we want to get updates, we want everyone to have the same kind of content, working with the same content. And one way to do this is to just share, like have one remote database and everybody is basically connected to that database. So every time there is a change in the database, everyone just gets it immediately. But it's not really a perfect solution. Like you might, when you're like doing development, you're in your like own small world, and you might just want to focus really on one specific problem. So it can be really annoying if content is updating and something unexpected is happening. So you don't really want that. And it also has the problem that you need to be connected like 100% of the time, which is not always possible. Like sometimes you might like fall out, and you still want to be up and running with WordPress. So we found this library called SyncDB, and we really like. I'm not sure it really gets the credit that it should get. It's super useful actually. It's like a bash script of that syncs the databases for you, and it also syncs like the different assets and stuff, like the media files and stuff like that. So so the way this works is like all the developers can be working on their own database, and yeah, so SyncDB makes it possible to sync these databases when you want to and when you need to. So we think this is a really like good process, and also like often we have this one setup where where the client can always look at the latest working code. It is up to date. So the way this works is like you can either like pull from the main server when you need to, and this actually fits really well with a Git workflow. Like you pull the latest repository, and then you kind of pull the latest database and the media files you need. So you can always be in sync. And it's also possible to push changes. If you make some changes locally, you can push them. So you can go like both directions. So and this helps a lot, we think, when you're working as a team together in a WordPress project. So my last point is making the site SEO friendly, and this is also a really popular plugin. I guess many of you know it, or yeah, I see you nodding. But yeah, we highly recommend using it. It takes care of so many things for you, and it does like titles and description and all the metadata you want for your page. And yeah, like all the open graph tags and for Facebook and Twitter and everything, it helps the editor to kind of manage this content. It's super useful, and it even actually, like when writing the content, it rates your content. It can give you some grades, like how you're actually doing as an editor. Like, is this content, is it fulfilling the keywords that we want to use and stuff like that? So, highly recommend it. We use it on every project. So to wrap this up, lessons learned using WordPress as a CMS. I mean, WordPress is really flexible. It sometimes means that you have to do more yourself, such as like the internationalization and stuff like that. You have to kind of like figure it out on your own sometimes. And it allows you to make these like custom templates, custom post types, and this custom data that you want for your sites. And it's also great that you can have your own workflow. Like if you have your own like front end workflow that you're comfortable with, you can use that with WordPress. I mean, it's free. Everyone loves that. It's really mature. It's been around for a long time. The user interface, like the WordPress admin client, has a really good user interface, in my opinion. I mean, I feel really good to recommend it to my clients. It's like to hand it over to them, and it feels good. And especially with the latest version, I mean, it's responsive. It's just nice. So compared to other CMSs, especially. And the community is really active. This is almost the best part. I mean, the documentations are really good. Like if you have some problems, like you can always reach out. Somebody will help you. You have meetups like this one. And it's I mean, WordPress is pretty active. It's like it's evolving at a fast pace. So we love it. We think it's great, and we really look forward to see how it's going to evolve going forward. I think that's kind of the most exciting part. So thank you.
I think we have time for one question.
One question. Yes.
The sync DB thing.
Yeah.
You said I didn't exactly understand what it was. I understand what it does, but
Yeah. I see.
it was what is some kind of shell script or.
Yes. It's like
Okay.
a script.
So where is the database that you share? Where is that located?
So it uses SSH to for the communications. So you need to just have a database on a server which supports SSH communication without the password. Like you have to set up, like similar like you work with Git basically. It's kind of the same process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. All right. What a great presentation. Yeah. Never heard of that SyncDB thing.
No.
It's gonna be really interesting to check it out.
Yeah.
So we have come to the final speaker in our wonderful WordPress evening, and it will be Cecilia Svensson, who is going to be talking about using WordPress in a kind of day-to-day business scenario.
Yes,
So
I will try to. Anyways.
So we'll just set up really quickly.
Yes, I will need a minute or a minute and a half maybe, so please talk and do something so I can run back and forth. Don't leave, please don't leave. Not yet. Erik, är det din eller dator? Ja. Kan jag flytta på? Det är kanske bättre om du...
Check it out. See the folders.
Just email me if you can see it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Back here.
Developing.
User time.
Indefinitely.
Funkar det här?
Ja, kom igen.
Which is
Okay.
yeah, that's pretty much my situation. And now I'm do some no, right now I have yeah, exactly.
Så få, då måste vi ändå vara rätt så tekniken.
So, almost there now. I think I'm ready. Nobody left. Oh, one left. You can't win them all. I really like this quote where Edison explains the essence of being an entrepreneur as I see it. An entrepreneur is a person that finds ways that work. And other ways. And entrepreneurs seem to look upon failure not as failures, but just another way that didn't work. I try to ignore him. It's a bit difficult. I'm very glad to see all of you here tonight, and I'm very happy to be here. My name is Cecilia Svensson. I am a writer and a lecturer. That's a really tough word in English. I write and lecture about alcoholism, or preferably sobriety. It's not like I'm pro-alcoholism. I think we need more of that. I work with sobriety. But you can be calm. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. I'm going to talk about the metadata of my work. And WordPress is one of my greatest tools when I do my day-to-day business. And I am a lone entrepreneur, a solo entrepreneur. And I use WordPress and a lot of other tools, and I'm going to share with you today what kinds of tools I use, some of them anyway. And then I'm going to talk about some of my plugins that I use in WordPress, and I will finish off about how to publish your own book. And let me check my time. It's a bit after 8. We're a bit behind schedule, right? Okay. So it may be no problem. Okay. If you have to leave, just leave. I'll understand. So when I saw this group, Meetup, WordPress in Stockholm, I was really, really happy because it's something that I would enjoy to come and be a part of as a participant in the audience. That was my plan. It took like 5 hours or so, and it was filled up. So it was like 30 people on the waiting list when I found it. And I think I saw it the same day or something. Then I saw this. We are currently looking for speakers. I saw a way in. So I called up Stanislav and said, hey, what kind of speakers are you looking for anyway? So, and he explained to me the great idea that anyone could apply a subject, and you in the audience could vote. So thanks for that. Without you, I wouldn't be here tonight because it was full when I saw it. So thank you very much. So my first piece of advice for this evening is that you should always ask. If there's something you want, dream about, long for, want to have or do, ask. You just might get it. I was happy for a while until he told me about this streaming thing. Then I wanted to first kill him and then die. So I've been to therapy sessions for a week now. I have a couple of friends in the audience who will take care of me if I faint. You should always ask. And I really like the quote of Anthony Robbins, you know, Tony Robbins, where he says, if you see somebody who has something that you want, they weren't lucky, they did something. So get off your butt and do and ask. That's my advice for you. And I have a great example from my own life this is my second book. I wrote my second book, and I had a dream that I wanted to publish, to make an audiobook out of it. And since it's my book, it's my story, it should be me reading the audiobook, right? Well, at the time I listened to a lot of audiobooks, and I have a favorite reader. It's a Swedish actor. And one day I just got the idea, what if he could read my book? And then I fought this, the devil that says it could never happen, it will never work. How are you going to do that? For like 6 months or so. And then I figured there's really only one way to find out for sure. I need to call him and ask him. So somehow I found his telephone number. I called him up. I stumbled on every word I had to say to him and explained to him what I wanted. And he said, yes, I would love to do that. Okay, great. So here I have now my audiobook with him, Niklas Falk, reading my book. Easy peasy. No, it wasn't that easy. It took a long time, but it was really, really great. And if I only had dreamed about, I wish that could happen, I would still be in my living room wondering what it would be like. So ask if you want something. You might regret it if you get it, but... So just some words about WordPress. This I found confusing in the beginning. The two different worlds and what they mean. So just to be sure that we are on the same base here, it comes in two different packages of ways, WordPress.org and com. WordPress.org, it's the free world. It's where you can change anything you want to. You can add any plugin you want to. You can change the source code, do anything you like. There's no hosting provided. You have to take care of that yourself. To choose a provider for that. And the WordPress.com, hosting is included, but you're not totally free and you cannot do whatever you want. You can choose between the plugins they have selected for you. There are like 20,000 of them anyway, so I guess you'll manage, but that's the truth. I really like the thought of the free world, so I am on .org. And I've chosen Lupia to host my site. I chose them for 3 reasons. They have support every day of the week. And as an entrepreneur, every day of the week can be a work day. And I really needed that, especially in the beginning. They support WordPress itself, if they have the time. And every time I've needed support from them regarding WordPress, they have been able to help me. And 3, they have their servers here in Sweden, and I really like that. They are in Västerås, not in Ukraine or whatever. When I first started out, I used the standard 2000 themes, some different versions of that, and it was fine, but I wanted to move on, and I went to Theme Hunt. Have you ever done that? Like a gazillion different themes out there. And I wanted something simple, and I found this really, really beautiful, as I think, theme called Graphene. It's built by this Japanese gentleman called Takao Utsumi. If you're watching Takao, because I tweeted it earlier and you answered me, so hi. Takao, he has built this beautiful theme. And I'm not very fond of Swinglish things. It's either English or Swedish, not both at the same time. I'm all with you there, Eric. So I wanted to translate this theme. I have never done that before. It was really easy. I used Poedit, and I contacted and wrote to Takao and said, I will gladly contribute my language files to you so you can include it to your theme. And he did that in the next release. So now Graph is available in Swedish. And I really like that idea that we all can be a part of a community where we can contribute and help and give back something, because he gave me Graphy. So I was very happy to do that. And this is what Graphy looks when it comes to me. I have one English site. page on my site, and this is what it looks like. If you haven't already, I guess everybody in here have, but if you haven't hooked up with Google Analytics, please do. Make sure you do. You don't have to understand everything. I sure don't. I don't understand half of it, but I connected my site to Google Analytics early on, which gives me ability to go back and take care of that data later on as I grow into this. It helps me. And I also like Joost a lot. When it comes to SEO and search engine optimization, I think Joost has excellent guides to explain that, how it works, and their plugin is excellent. It helps me in a lot of ways to use that plugin that we heard Jurto talk about earlier. Really, really great. And it's easy enough for me anyway. I'm not a techie. So every summer I have a summer project for myself and my business, and I had the SEO project a few years back. And then I spent a lot of time on this site, Pineberry. They have a great service. You can enter a URL and the search word you would like to be found with. And then you get like a report card. So you can get 100 score, that's max. And I got like 45 in the beginning. And they give you feedback, what you can do and change to get a higher rating. Because we all have sites to communicate a message to visitors. And we want to be found. It's a good thing to be ranked high when people search. This in combination with writing good content, of course. Because if your content is crap, SEO won't help you make good business. So you need to have like a balance there. Dig into this. Something about different tools I use every day. People sometimes think I'm very organized and that I remember everything. It's because of this elephant. I use Evernote for everything in my life. Everything I want to remember, every blog article, to-do list, everything. So it's not me, it's this elephant. This in combination with Symbaloo, which really gets me through my linked lists. I have a graphical memory. I can visualize and see everything in pictures. So long linked lists don't help me. But with Symbaloo, I can have different tabs. This is not my tab, for instance, so I'm not very interested in all of these. It's an example tab, but you can have different tabs for different subject and different colors and group them in whatever way you want. Really, really great site. And when I write a lot of blog posts. I like to attach a photo here and there, or in my newsletters. I use this site, free digital photos. And you can search in their database, which is huge, a lot of photos. And you can use their photos for free if you enter where you got it from. And you can also purchase photos from there if you want to get rid of that. Excellent site. Another site that I use a lot is Unsplash. They publish 10 new photos every day, beautiful photos. You cannot search, so it's not as easy, but you can scroll through pictures and you can do whatever you want with it. They give them away. Amazing. And when it comes to photos and photo editing, I use Acorn. Acorn is software only on Mac, I'm sorry, but it's the one I use. It's the only thing tonight that I'm talking about that actually costs something. Every other product I have mentioned is free or have a paid version, but you can use it for free if you want to. But Acorn, it's like $30 or so. It's an easy enough product for me. I have tried free ones and expensive ones, and they are too difficult for me. I'm not into that picture thing. I don't understand half of it, but with Acorn I can actually manage. Another easy tool is PicMonkey, which is an online service. And you can edit photos on the fly on the internet. You don't even have to register an account. You can just edit your picture and download it. So it's really, really good. Let's talk about connecting to other people. These are the main platforms I focus on when it comes to connecting. I don't need to introduce them to you. You're familiar with all of them. I'm sure I am on more than these, but these are the ones I focus on. And it's quite funny because Twitter, I was resisting Twitter for a very long time. I thought it was not serious enough, and it's not good, it doesn't do anything. And then I realized, how can I have an opinion about something that I don't know nothing about, because I didn't even have an account at the time. So I joined Twitter just to prove how bad it was. And it didn't take very long for me to realize that this is great. So now Twitter is the one tool that I focus the most on. It was nothing that I had in mind before I started using it. To manage my way around Twitter, I use two other tools primarily. One is called Manage Flitter, which is a tool that I can organize the people I follow and the people who follow me. I will not go into detail what it means. If you use Twitter and like that, take a look at Manage Flitter. And this is the one I heard about here. Christopher talked a couple of years back when WordPress celebrated 10 years. It was really cool. They had like a Twitter stream here showing all the tweets online, and it was really nice. TweetDeck. Twitter can be somewhat of a waterfall, too much information. With this I can create my own streams and follow subjects that I'm interested in. So TweetDeck really helps me. Connecting, MailChimp. MailChimp, if you can fall in love with a company, then I'm in love with this MailChimp company. MailChimp is the chimp. They have produced a product that is so easy, beautiful, and I love it. Yeah, I use this product to produce my newsletters and email my blog posts and to handle downloadables on my site. And if I ever going to change career, I want to be a part of MailChimp. And you can use it for free, but it's so great that when I first started using it, I felt I want to pay. That's how great it is. It's the best thing I have heard of. And it never fails, and they have excellent support, and they're so super nice. I love you, MailChimp. And when writing is a challenge. It's easy for me to write, and especially if I can write very long, but to write good copy, that's difficult. So that's my challenge. And Copyblogger focuses on teaching that, writing good copy, writing good texts. They have tons of good ebooks about all the subjects that you're interested in if you're into writing catchy headlines, SEO, focusing on SEO, and I can really recommend that you take a look at their site. My Copyblogger, you just register your email address and you get tons and tons. And actually, when I get a newsletter from Copyblogger, usually I feel with newsletters, I can, if anyone can relate to feeling it's down on the priority list or the trash can, somewhere in between. When I get something from Copyblogger, I feel, yay, I got a new newsletter I want to read it instantly. So really, really great site. Eventbrite is the site I use when I have a lecture. I use this to make an event, and people can register to come. It's also free to use. If the event is free, they don't charge you. If you charge for the event, they take a small percentage of the ticket's price. And it's great because people can search for events going on in the area that they're in. So they can also be, you can also sort of advertise through Eventbrite. ScreenLeap is a tool I just stumbled upon one day. It's a way of sharing your screen with somebody, and there are several other ways to do that. But the fine thing with this is the person I'm sharing my screen with don't have to have a special account, don't have to download anything on their computer. I can just send them a link through email and they can see my screen. And I'm part of several WordPress groups on Facebook, for instance. And sometimes I see some person struggle with something that's either really easy and I can help them quickly, or it's something that I don't know really much about and I can help them. So I contact them, call them up and say, hey, I can help you. And I'll show show you. Instead of writing like 50 status messages back and forth, I'll be happy to share my screen 15 minutes and it's done. I like to do that when I have the time. Another community that I have, this is my lunch date actually. Being a writer, it's a lonely job, so I spend a lot of lunches together with Ted. And Ted's slogan is ideas worth spreading. And it's a community where people share their knowledge and ideas and thought, and I can get inspired or learn something new, which is really great. And it's also a community where I can contribute. They have talks in all kinds of languages, and I have translated several of them from English to Swedish, so there are Swedish subtitles. We all can do that. Just chip in and contribute with whatever you can. Like I said, being a writer is a lonely job, so I do what I can to network. Being here is one of those things. And one company I found last year is called Mitt Företag. They have fairs and all kinds of things for small business owners. And they have like a tour in Sweden with 16 fairs going all the way through Sweden, which is really nice. And you can go and visit. And other things this is quite surprising. I've been a member of the union since forever, and when I quit my day job to become a writer and business owner, I thought it would be natural to leave the union. But as it turns out, they have a membership for business owners. So I joined that. I'm really, really happy with that. So that's the first time I'm happy being a member of the union, which is kind of a paradox, really. Was when I was an Eventbrite, of course. I can also search for events going on and find you. And meetups, of course, meetups. Other things I've done and can recommend is taking a class in something that you would like to learn. And Folkhögskolan, their classes are free of charge, totally free. Tons of classes. I took a writing class. I wrote a book and then took the writing class. You might want to do it the other way around, but it's still great. So, those were a few things about tools I use every day almost. I'll talk about plugins in WordPress for a bit. I use 32 of them. I love them all, and I will not go through them all. We don't have that time. You don't have to worry. And it was really tricky to choose which ones to talk about tonight. I chose 8. These are the 8 I'm going to mention. When I first started with WordPress, I did not have a security plugin. Luckily, I have a password policy. How many of you have a password policy? I have really, really great. I have really, really tricky passwords, long passwords. I never use the same password twice in 2 different programs or sites. So I was not hacked. But now, since installing WordPress security, I know how many attacks I have, and there are plenty of them. And there are like a gazillion settings in here, and you should really take a look at it, or another security plugin if you don't have one already. And the screenshot I chose here is from where they block sites. If you have too many attacks from same IP number on a time period, they block them out, so you don't have to deal with them anymore. I realize now it was my mistakes that I did in the beginning that is the base for the plugins that I chose tonight. This is another mistake I did. When I wanted to remove a page or change the URL of a page, I just did. I just deleted or changed and whatever, which meant that the visitors would end up in a 404, this page does not exist, of course, since I didn't take care of that. So, but now I am taking care of it. So I use this plugin, SEO Redirection, where I can reroute URLs to the new ones. And it also shows me of actual 404 hits that take place now, so I can sort of clean up where I screw up before. This in combination with the plugin called 404 page, which enables me to create a 404 page of my own design. So instead of coming to that standard dull page, I try to help my visitor. I encourage them to contact me if there was a page they were missing, and if it wasn't just a mistype. And I also entered a sitemap to help them find their way around. Plugin organizer. This is really geeky. This is a plugin for plugins. Can't beat that. And nice things you can do are you can sort the plugins in which order they are presented, and you can also group them. I don't really need that. What I really need is you can turn plugins off. I don't use every plugin, every site, or every page, or every blog post. So if there is a plugin I don't use on blog posts, I can switch that off for that particular part of my WordPress installation. So my summer project, I haven't used this very long, but I like it so far. My summer project this year will be page speed. So I will dig into that and see what I can do to increase that. So and this I think will help me a lot. In most themes and in my theme, I can have a page with the sidebar or without a sidebar. And I really wanted a third option. I want a different sidebar. So this plugin custom sidebar helps me to create. I have here one sidebar which contains category and tag clouds, and another page that has a totally different sidebar, which is really great. One thing I see in the forums people often ask if there is a contact form. They really want a contact form. That's great. And I can recommend this one. I use Easy Contact Forms. You can have as many contact forms you want. I have 5 different ones. You can add as many fields as you want, and you can translate every field in what language you want. And you can have an on-screen message to the user. You can send auto-reply. You can reroute to another page. So it's an excellent contact form. Never fails. JARP, yet another related posts plugin. Just a plugin I add at the end of every blog post. So to give the reader a tip about other blog posts I've written about the same subject. And I also have the last one here, WordPress popular posts, that counts how many times a certain blog post has been read. And I can set the frequency either per day or week or month or whatever. I have 2 different, mostly read today and this week. And one funny thing is that on both sides, the same blog post is always on top. I wrote one thing a long time ago about light beer, and it's the most popular thing on my blog. It doesn't matter how much I've written since and what subject I write about, you cannot beat this. So my challenge now is to write something that's more intriguing to people than light beer. I don't know what it is. I have no idea. And I just finished a blog 100 challenge. Can't beat this. Who knew? Who knew? And the last words on plugins is this site. I really like this site, Tidy Repo. They produce curated lists about plugins they like. So instead of going through the 36,000 plugins in the repository of WordPress, you can peek at this site and see what they like, and they explain what they do and how you should install it. Real good. So, my last section, how to publish your own book. I meet a lot of people, and most of them say, I always wanted to write a book. How many of you have thought that in here? Raise your hand. Wow. How many of you already did write a book and publish it? Okay, so this seems to be the right subject for you. Yeah. Well, you should start with writing it, of course, and then you should get a mentor. And this is a tip not only for writers, of course, but you should hook up with somebody who's done this. And I got this advice. You should get a mentor. And how do I do that? Well, you talked about that author you have in your hometown, because I don't live here. Yeah, you're right. So I called her and asked, and she said yes. You should always ask. And she gave me a lot of advice about how to publish your own book. That was really, really helpful for me. So hook up with a mentor. If you cannot find a mentor, you can look at Almi and their mentor program. they have a mentor. And if you have something else that you can contribute, you can be a mentor to somebody else too. That's nice. After that, you should always hire an editor. I did not do that for my first book, which was a big mistake. An editor really gets your text into shape. You can write and think you've written the best text ever, but they will do it even better. So hire an editor. If you can't find one, you can take a look at Författarcentrum. You can also search for professional readers, and you'll find one. Hire an editor. It's worth it. Even though you have read the text many times, even though you had an editor, you should always also use a proofreader, because there will be mistakes in your text for sure. I don't know how it's possible, but it is. Hire a proofreader. When your text is ready and you're ready to print it, you need to fix one thing first. Every book has an ID number. An ISBN number. And here in Sweden, it's the National Public Library, Kungliga Biblioteket, that issues those. And it's really easy. You just fill out a form on the internet, and 2 days later you have an email. You just say how many numbers you want, how many publications you're counting on publishing. And every media has different numbers, so these are 2. So if you're thinking about writing one, ask for 2, so you can have one extra. So these are 2 of mine. And the next thing is to go to a printing house. And you also need a designer. I skipped that part, but of course you need a designer to create your design and put that number in there. I happen to live next door to a printing house, so I know her, the woman who has it, so I went in there and said, I want to do a book, can you help me? Yeah, sure. And I really like to be close to the process and be able to feel the paper they're going to print it on and that. But it's not the most cheapest way to do that. It's very expensive to print books in Sweden. If you go to Poland or somewhere else, it's cheaper. But then you are away from the process and you cannot really communicate as easily. Print on demand, I have no experience of that, and it's the most expensive one. But if you're not printing that many copies, that could be an option too. When you have printed your book and it's ready and you have like 20 boxes in your home with books and you're going to sell them, you need to register your book at Bokrondellen, which is the database in Sweden where all the bookstores look for books and find books. So if you go into a bookstore and ask them, do you have this book? This is where they search. So if your book is not registered here, I would say your book does not exist. It needs to be there. It costs like 300 crowns or so. So you don't have to do it, but you should. And if you plan to also have your book electronically, you should register it at Elib, which delivers the books to bookstores and libraries, and which is the same for audiobooks. So my book is also on Elib and all the libraries that you can find. So that's short about the process, how to sort of get your book out there. And then comes the next big thing about marketing, which I'm not going to cover here tonight, but I challenge the one in here that feels that marketing is my thing. Please come to the next meetup and talk about marketing. So that was my presentation, real quick. And before I leave, I want to know if there's anything you want to ask me.
Yeah, what's your technical background before getting into it?
You repeat the question?
Yes. What's my technical background before I started writing books? I'm a programmer and I've been in IT business for 20 years. I worked as a project manager also. So I haven't done WordPress at all before. I've done other things. But of course, it was easier for me to understand, perhaps. Yes?
Is there anything you're missing? Like you think that a niche that WordPress does not fill?
If I'm missing anything from WordPress? Can't think of it now. got it all in there. Yeah. Yes?
You wrote 2 books.
Yeah.
Are they both about alcoholism or
Yeah, I can't stop. No.
or fighting alcoholism?
Yeah. No, it's I wanted to bring it here, but it's so ugly that I thought I'd spare you. That's my self-published book, my first book. And then a real publisher wanted to publish my book. And it was, all copies were out, so I needed to do that. And I decided to rewrite. So I rewrote every sentence and every chapter, everything, and new material. And so, but basically, it's the same book, but it's not. Nothing is the same, but it's the same book. See. But this is from another publisher. Not this, though. This is my production. Yes. Yes?
You said that you should first write the book and then contact the editor, or actually get a way to publish it. So, when you wrote the book, how long did the process take to do the rest of the steps?
No, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I didn't mean it like that. Of course, you can contact an editor in the beginning of a project. Also, just happened that before the steps I was going through, you have to have a text from the scenario I was talking about. So your question was how long it took for?
Well, apart from writing the book, how long did the rest of the process take, actually?
About 6 months or so. So when you write a book and think that you're finished with it, you got as much job left. So when you're finished, you're like halfway through. So that's a lot of job, writing a book, a lot of job. And I swore when I finished my first one, I'll never do this again. But I know I feel the same way after this session tonight. I'll never talk publicly again. And I tend to do that again and again and again. What's the question down here?
I was wondering, I think I missed when you said you had a slide that called free digital photos.
Yeah.
And before Unsplash, did you have another program?
No, those were the two.
Okay.
So, free digital photos and Unsplash. And I talked about Acorn. Was it Acorn you thought about?
Yeah, you mentioned Acorn and Pigment.
Yeah. You have it all, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Another question?
All right.
Okay, thank you very much for listening.
Wow, what a great evening. I just want to say just like a quick thank you to everyone who took part in making this evening happen. Ryan or Larry, who made the initial contact. We have Andreas Ek, live streaming manager. And of course all our wonderful speakers.
And Stanislav for
Yes.
actually
Yeah.
organizing.
Wait, and Magnus, our wonderful photographer. So the event is officially wrapped up. Feel free to take a copy of Aftonbladet on your way out. We have provided it for you. And we really hope to do this again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.